Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Silva. Thank you for joining me for this talk on social anxiety disorder, social phobia. This is a condition that's fairly common. It's by no means rare, but I think it's poorly understood. It's not talked about a lot, despite the fact that it's a fairly common condition. And I think because patients are stigmatized by it, these are anxious patients, that part of the syndrome is they fear being scrutinized and judged by other people. And so naturally, they're not going to discuss their pathological shyness. They would be reluctant to do that as well. And I just think it's something that we tiptoe around and that we don't talk about a lot. We absolutely should. I'm all for the destigmatization of mental illness. And I think by having open and honest discussions, that's really the best way to get around that sort of thing. So I encourage anybody out there who's watching this video who suffers from social anxiety to share their experiences and what maybe helps them in certain situations, because I think that the more we discuss it, the better it is for everyone involved. We don't really know what the pathophysiologies are, what exactly is going wrong, and why some people don't have social phobia that do have generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder, and then other people that have social phobia and OCD but don't have panic attacks. We don't know why some people, presumably with inadequate serotonergic neurotransmission, we don't know why it manifests the way it does in different people. That's still a mystery. But this is more than just shyness. It's clinically significant shyness. These people are painfully shy. And it really is a very uncomfortable feeling. You see avoidant behaviors, you see physical signs and symptoms, and it's a part of our evolutionary past. It's been described in civilizations going back thousands of years. So we all may be somewhat familiar with the feeling of social anxiety. There are some people that are just natural extroverts who are gregarious all the time and who rarely, if ever, experience this feeling. It is an irrational fear of interacting with other people. And so really the better word for it is interpersonal anxiety as opposed to social anxiety, because the term social can be misleading. Social means interpersonal, not that you're socializing, because this could also be present in professional relationships. It can be experienced with the cashier, just checking out at the grocery store, paying for your groceries. The difficulty with eye contact, the dread of the small talk, not knowing what to say, feeling as though anything that you're saying rings false, and that the other individual is as keenly aware that the conversation is affected, stilted, and unnatural. The patient is so aware of being tasked with having to converse that they can't let go and let the conversation have a life of its own, which is what conversations are supposed to do. These individuals often feel anxiety about demonstrating the anxiety. So other people knowing how uncomfortable they are becomes part of the neurosis, part of the problem. I had a patient whose lip would quiver whenever he would experience this social anxiety, and he had severe social anxiety disorder in the context of a recurrent severe major depression. And he would worry about the other person seeing the quivering lip and then feeling all the more exposed, all the more scrutinized. And so he would have a snowball effect where it would become worse. He would just let family members deal with the customers, even though these were brief, professional, transactional interactions. He just couldn't bring himself to do it. And this is on medication. This is not performance anxiety unless we view performance in the context of carrying on a conversation or interacting. These individuals feel keenly anxious about their performance simply making small talk. Small talk is daunting. They dread it, and everything seems like small talk. These individuals need a buffer, which can sometimes be another person. And it can also be, though, things like a uniform or a mask. There are some people that did better during the height of the COVID pandemic because everybody was wearing a mask and you just kind of feel somewhat shielded, and it might be easier not to have to make eye contact when half of your face is covered. I had a patient, she would wear a baseball cap whenever she would leave the house, and just having the cap on, the visor, she kind of felt like her face was partially shielded. It wasn't obscured. You can see a person's face completely when they're wearing a baseball cap, but having that visor helped her with the not making eye contact. They have trouble. It's a very intimate thing. The ultimate solution, of course, is serotonin, because that gets at the heart of the problem. They don't have enough serotonin, or their neurons don't know what to do with it, but it's a stubborn symptom that doesn't tend to get 100% better. These individuals, even the ones that take high-dose SSRIs and endure side effects that impact their lifestyles, tend to continue to periodically experience it, just as we all might in our day-to-day lives. If, for example, we go to a party by ourselves and we don't know anybody and everyone else is mingling, and you don't know where to stand or how to stand, what to do with your body and your body language. You feel like you need to be holding on to something, a drink, just to have something in your hand, just to have something to do. And if it's an alcohol-containing beverage, all the better. You can see these people at parties, they're off to one side, they're shifting their posture, they look uncomfortable. Alcohol, benzodiazepines like Xanax and Valium and other sedative tranquilizers, they're really the only substances that are guaranteed, if you take enough of them, to knock out social anxiety 100% for a brief period of time. And in fact, as we all know, a person can go overboard and become so disinhibited and so expansive that they actually violate some boundaries and some norms and behave in ways that are truly embarrassing, whether they have social anxiety or not. A lot of times, it's necessary for individuals who are severely affected to take a little Xanax before they're willing to venture into a social interaction, a social function, like a dinner party, or to go really anywhere where there's going to be a lot of people that they don't know very well. It tends to be worse in groups, and even then, a lot of times they won't go unless they're accompanied by somebody that they feel safe, because of this irrational fear of being scrutinized and not knowing how to interact socially in a way that's convincing, that's comfortable. They feel like phonies and they feel exposed. And so when they're making the small talk, they're hemming and hawing. They don't know what to say about the weather. And not everybody has this degree of insight or is necessarily having this internal monologue with themselves, but on an unconscious or preconscious level, they're feeling, if not thinking consciously, that they have nothing to say. They don't know what to say. They have nothing in common with this person. Socializing is alien to them. It feels unnatural in that moment. Who knows what the evolutionary significance of that is? It's much easier to postulate the evolutionary significance of the opposite thing, being gregarious and being a pack animal, having a canine nature. So who knows why that particular trait has survived, because there's a significant percentage of the population that is on the spectrum where they're less social and they're less outgoing, more introverted, but you can be so far that you have this condition where it's social phobia. It is a disorder because it causes dysfunction in social, academic, or occupational functioning. And that's as it's defined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. For the sake of time, in this part one, I'm not going to go into the diagnostic criteria or the stats. I will cover that in the follow-up talk. In this talk, I really just want to focus on what it feels like and what it's like. And again, most of us have experienced it, not necessarily to the degree that people with the disorder experience it. I have experienced it because I am in recovery from chemical dependency. And so as a consequence of substance abuse, I have experienced chemically induced social anxiety. Certain substances bring it out, for example, cannabis, and to those people who are susceptible. And people will talk about how they get quote unquote paranoid when they smoke pot. But They're not talking about paranoia. They're not talking about persecutory ideations, ideas of reference, or grandiose paranoia, which is the other type. They're talking about social anxiety. They're talking about feeling uncomfortable, not knowing what to say, having trouble making eye contact, but they call it paranoia. It's a misnomer. They're talking about what I'm talking about in this video. Not everybody feels it, but those who are susceptible to it do. And then there are some people that only ever feel social anxiety when they're high on marijuana. You can also feel it as a paradoxical reaction to certain serotonergic drugs like mushrooms, psilocybin, and ecstasy, MDMA, because during the high, it quells this particular anxiety, all anxiety, because you get a sense of well-being, but in particular social anxiety, and you become very expansive. And people that are high on ecstasy are notorious for being very touchy-feely, and even with people they don't know that well, strangers even, and they can be all handsy and hugging and inappropriately because they're on the opposite end of that spectrum where they're expansive. But a lot of times when they're coming down as a rebound effect, and in particular I've seen this in individuals who are susceptible to it with magic mushrooms, that if not on the way up, definitely on the way down, they can't be comfortable because they're coming down. Psilocybin for sure, and other substances which adjust that threshold so profoundly. Ultimately, this is a chemically based problem. It is an endogenous problem. And if a person is experiencing an exacerbation, has stopped taking their medication for it, for example, or they're on a substance that exacerbates it, then they can feel it with anyone. They can feel it with close friends, with family members, parents, siblings, even with spouses, though that's probably the last person that an individual is going to feel uncomfortable with. Usually one's spouse is the safe person. Or a best friend, whoever is the person to whom the individual is closest and to whom that individual confides and feels safe with. The person who often functions as a buffer. As a matter of fact, in situations where a person does go to a party, say with their significant other, when that person, the husband or the wife or the boyfriend or the girlfriend, leaves the room and they're left alone with this other person or these other people, anxiety, social anxiety can flare in that moment. Suddenly the buffer is gone and now it's one-on-one, and they have to carry the conversation, and they have to be the one to make eye contact and to keep the conversation alive and to volley back and forth. And a person's social anxiety can wax and wane like that throughout an evening at a dinner party, say for example, as people come and go, as their safe people come and go. And of course a person's serotonin levels are not fluctuating from minute to minute, but they're vulnerable to it. And because psychology does play into it, your social anxiety is waxing and waning, ebbing and flowing, spiking and relaxing based on psychological factors, based on environmental triggers. And suddenly you don't know where to look or how to stand or what to say. Structured interactions, such as a doctor-patient interaction, can be a lot easier for individuals because these are structured transactional interactions where there may be questions and answers, an interview, an obvious reason for why you're interacting with the professional. A person can feel it with their doctor, even their doctor they've been seeing for a while, or a therapist that they've been seeing for a while, because it really is irrational and it really has to do with brain chemistry and the things that impinge upon that, including sleep and nutrition and just how well the organism is doing. But my point is that if you don't have to worry about why are we even interacting, what is the pretense, since we have nothing in common and I just don't know what to say to you and I can't even look at you in the eyes, that fear of, isn't it obvious that we shouldn't even be interacting? We shouldn't be standing next to each other, much less talking. We need to go our separate ways. That whole dread that is what underlies this neurosis, whether a person has that insight or not, whether these thoughts are conscious or not, is gone in situations where it's transactional. You're there for a reason, and maybe you're talking to a professional. Even so, it can still be felt with the cashier, with the teller at the bank. If it's bad enough, even just, I need to cash this check, or I need to pay for this milk and these eggs, it can exist in those contexts as well. Other things that can help when the individual with social anxiety is interacting with a person who's just naturally warm and generous and who bridges the gap. People who are warm and friendly and who assist by handling more than their half of the conversation. And so they put people at ease, and they're good at putting people at ease. And so some people just have an ability to do that. A good therapist and a good practitioner, mental health practitioner, would be able to do that with all patients who might feel a little nervous the first time they go to see their mental health practitioner for the evaluation, but especially those individuals who are prone to it. Because these individuals can be literally mortified. In moments, they can feel intensely uncomfortable. And it's difficult even to put it into words. It's not as straightforward or as black and white as I will be humiliated. Although again, that is the core fear. But a lot of times it's not that specific as I'm going to say something embarrassing or I'm going to have a panic attack. People with panic disorder have acknowledged that sometimes part of their anxiety is the fear that they'll have a panic attack in front of other people. Well, I've had patients who fear that they can't make it to the bathroom in time, that there's not a bathroom nearby, where if they had to go, and so they have this irrational thought that they might experience urinary incontinence in front of people. But whether you're an individual who has a lot of insight and who is on a treatment regimen of medication and maybe cognitive behavioral therapy and some desensitization techniques and whatnot, you could still feel it. If you are sleep deprived and your medication is not right, and other factors, perhaps hormonal factors or other exogenous compounds that may have been introduced, and you could be reduced to just feeling it despite everything you've learned about it. Because it's not something you can decide not to feel. You feel what you feel, and if the symptom is upon you, it's upon you. And you can do what you can do using cognitive behavioral techniques, psychological techniques, to calm down your breathing, to try to focus on a rational thought and not to get carried away with, is my lip quivering? Can they see my lip quivering? Oh my God, it would be a catastrophe if they saw my lip quiver. You can talk yourself off the ledge or try to, but being on the ledge in the first place, that's something that happens. It's endogenous, it's something that happens, and it's best prevented pharmacologically. The dread of having to go and be around other people can really be debilitating. People can be quite avoidant, and there is a suggestion that social anxiety disorder is not only comorbid with avoidant personality disorder, but it may actually be the same condition. I'm of the school that it's the same condition. It's just on a spectrum, and it manifests slightly differently in different people. Just like some of those individuals have panic attacks, some don't. Some have OCD, some don't. In the same individual, you can't say that it's a different thing if they meet criteria for both social anxiety disorder, the phobia, and avoidant personality disorder. They don't have two different illnesses, it's one illness in the same individual. Now, across the board, because these are syndromes, you can't say that two individuals, one with social anxiety disorder, say, and the other who meets criteria only for avoidant personality disorder, you can't say that those two people have the same condition because it's a syndrome, and there may be more than one condition that gives rise to these syndromes. And so we don't know what the root cause is. We don't know what the exact pathophysiology is. If it's the same person, yeah, it's the same disease. So anyway, I believe that social anxiety disorder and avoidant personality disorder are the same condition in the same person. So if you've ever felt shy or if you've ever felt awkward at a party, that's it. That's the feeling, and just magnify it 100 times. It can be so bad that it can precipitate a panic attack. And it can be so bad that a person has to leave. They are standing there preoccupied with what are they going to say next and how can they make a gracious exit. They're looking around the room to see where the nearest door is. And if it's super bad, then they just leave and they don't worry about it. They worry about it. I've seen people just bolt, and others that just sort of look at themselves like, are they okay? What's wrong with them? That they had to just escape. And what's wrong is that they couldn't take it anymore. They were suffering and just so worried about the big elephant in the room, the elephant that only they can see a lot of times. Because a lot of times if it's not severe, it won't be obvious to onlookers or people that just are not very attuned to it, that maybe don't really know about it. Those people may be completely oblivious, but the person who's experiencing the anxiety is standing there thinking, everybody knows. I'm super uncomfortable. I don't know what to say to these people, and the whole room knows it. And the irony is that a lot of times that's not the case. There's a lot of projection that can go on, which is another defense mechanism. Thank you for listening. Please look for the more formal presentation that I'm going to do reviewing the diagnostic criteria.